The fluorescent lights above me buzzed like angry wasps, casting a sickly yellow glow across the cramped attorney's office. I could smell the stale coffee that had been sitting in the pot since morning, mixed with the sharp scent of printer ink and Derek's cologne. That same overpowering musk he'd worn when we were together. The one that used to make me feel safe, but now just made my stomach turn. Sign the goddamn papers, Emma. His fist came down on the cheap wooden table, making the pen jump. I flinched, hating myself for it, hating that after 3 years of being free from him, he could still make me feel small. The divorce papers sat between us like a battlefield, and I was losing ground with every passing second. Derek, I just need more time to read. Time? He laughed, and it was the cruel sound I remembered from our worst nights together. You've had 6 months. What more do you need to understand? You get nothing. The house is mine. The car is mine. You walked out, remember? You don't get to take half of my hard work just because you spread your legs for a few years. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers drumming against his leather briefcase. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Derek had paid him after all. I was here alone. Couldn't afford my own representation. Couldn't afford much of anything since I'd left with nothing but a backpack and my dignity, though even that felt threadbare now. Outside the window, rain streaked down the glass in rivulets, distorting the city lights beyond. It was nearly 8 in the evening, and this office building was mostly empty. Derek had insisted on the late meeting, said it was the only time that worked with his schedule. Now I understood why. No witnesses. No one to hear me if I needed help. I'm not signing away my rights to the apartment, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I helped pay the mortgage for 2 years before you decided to play victim and run to that women's shelter. Derek leaned forward, and I could see the vein pulsing in his temple, the one that always appeared before things got bad. You're pathetic, Emma. Always playing the victim. Sign the papers, or I swear to God I'll make your life even more miserable than it already is. My hands trembled as I picked up the pen. I hated how weak I felt, how the walls seemed to close in around me. The office was too small, too hot despite the November chill outside. I could feel sweat beating at the back of my neck, soaking into the collar of my only good blouse. The one I'd thrifted for $12, the one with the small stain on the sleeve that I always tried to hide. There's nothing more you can take from me, I whispered. Oh, sweetheart. Derek's smile was poisonous. I can always take more. I know where you work. I know you're waiting tables at that dive bar on 5th Street. Be a real shame if your boss found out about your problems, your instability, how you spent time in a shelter because you couldn't handle real life. The pen felt like lead in my hand. Outside, through the rain-streaked window, I could see the parking lot below, mostly empty except for a few scattered cars and one black SUV with tinted windows that seemed too expensive for this neighborhood. Something about it made my skin prickle, though I couldn't say why. Sign the papers. Derek's voice had dropped to that dangerous whisper I remembered too well. Mr. Henderson finally spoke up, his voice oily and practiced. Ms. Chen, I really think it would be in your best interest to settle this amicably tonight. Mr. Morrison has been more than generous with his offer. Generous? The word burst out of me before I could stop it. He's taking everything, the furniture I bought, the savings account I contributed to, even the cat. The cat I paid to feed, Derek interrupted. Everything in that apartment, I paid for. You were just a waitress then, and you're just a waitress now. You've never been anything more. The words hit like physical blows. I looked down at the papers, at the lines where my signature would seal away any claim to the life I'd tried to build, the life I'd thought was ours. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of him. The office felt suffocating. I could hear the rain harder now, hammering against the window like it was trying to break through. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, and in those brief moments of darkness, I felt utterly alone. I need to use the restroom, I said, standing abruptly. Sit down, Derek commanded. I need to use the restroom, I repeated, stronger this time. It was a small act of defiance, but it was all I had. Derek exchanged a look with Mr. Henderson, then waved his hand dismissively. 5 minutes. Then you come back and sign, or I'm filing a restraining order tomorrow. I'll tell them you've been stalking me, threatening me. Who do you think they'll believe? A successful sales manager, or a broke waitress with a history of running away? I walked out on shaking legs, my cheap heels clicking against the linoleum floor. The hallway was dimly lit, half the bulbs burnt out. I could hear the hum of the building's old heating system, smell the mildew that probably grew in the walls. This whole building felt like it was rotting from the inside out. The bathroom was at the end of the hall, and I pushed through the door gratefully, locking it behind me. The mirror showed me a ghost of who I used to be. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under my eyes, hair pulled back in a severe ponytail that did nothing to hide how much weight I'd lost. At 28, I looked 40. I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water run over my wrists, an old trick to calm my racing heart, but it wasn't working. Nothing was working. I was trapped, and Derek knew it. If I didn't sign, he'd make good on his threats. He'd get me fired, ruin what little reputation I had. Maybe even... No. I couldn't think about that. Couldn't let my mind go to those dark places where memories lived that I'd tried so hard to bury. I dried my hands on the rough paper towels, trying to steel myself for what I had to do. I'd sign the papers. I'd walk away with nothing, again. At least I'd be free of him. At least... The bathroom door rattled violently. "Time's up, Emma." Derek's voice was muffled, but clear. "Get out here now!" My hands gripped the edge of the sink. Just a few more seconds. Just a few more breaths. "I said now!" I opened the door to find him standing there, too close, invading my space the way he always had. His breath smelled like whiskey. Of course he'd been drinking. That's when he was worst. "I'm done playing games with you," he said, grabbing my arm. His fingers dug into my skin, and I knew there would be bruises tomorrow. There were always bruises. "You're going to sign those papers, and then you're going to disappear from my life. Understand?" He dragged me back down the hallway. I stumbled in my heels, trying to keep up, trying not to fall. "Mr." Henderson stood in the doorway of his office, watching with the blank expression of someone who'd decided this wasn't his problem. "Derek, please, you're hurting me. I'll show you hurt if you don't." The elevator dinged. It was such a small sound, barely audible over Derek's angry breathing and my own thundering heartbeat, but something about it made us both freeze. The elevator was at the end of the opposite hallway, and we watched as the doors slid open with a mechanical whisper. A man stepped out. Even from a distance, even in the dim lighting, I could see he was different from anyone I'd ever encountered in this shabby building. His suit was black, perfectly tailored to a frame that spoke of both power and danger. The fabric moved with him like liquid shadow as he walked, each step measured and deliberate. He was young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair styled with casual precision and a face that belonged in magazines or movies, all sharp angles and classical beauty. But it was his eyes that caught me. Even across the distance, I felt the weight of his gaze, dark, assessing, cold as winter frost. 2 men flanked him, both built like walls and wearing similar dark suits, but they faded into the background. He was all I could see. The scent reached me before I could process what was happening. Expensive cologne, something with notes of bergamot and cedar, undercut with something else, something dangerous. It cut through the stale office air like a knife. Derek's grip on my arm loosened slightly. I felt him tense beside me, some animal instinct recognizing a bigger predator. The man walked toward us with unhurried confidence, and I noticed details in fragments. The gleam of a watch that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. The perfect Windsor knot of his tie, the way his hands hung loose at his sides in a way that somehow suggested violence held in check. "Gentlemen." His voice was smooth, accented with something I couldn't quite place. Old money, perhaps, or old world. "I believe this floor is closed for the evening." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "We have an appointment. We're just finishing up some business. Your business is concluded." It wasn't a suggestion. The 2 men behind him moved slightly, a subtle shift that made the temperature in the hallway seem to drop 10 degrees. I saw Mr. Henderson pale, saw him actually take a step back into his office. Derek, however, puffed up with false bravado. "Look, buddy, I don't know who you think you are, but this is a private matter. So why don't you and your boyfriends get back in your elevator and— The stranger's eyes moved to Derek, and whatever he saw there made Derek's words die in his throat. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then those dark eyes shifted to me. I felt pinned beneath that gaze like a butterfly under glass. He studied my face with an intensity that made my skin flush. Took in Derek's hand, still gripping my arm. The tears I hadn't quite managed to hide, the way I held myself, small, trying to disappear. Something flickered across his expression. Something that looked almost like recognition. Though I'd never seen this man before in my life, I would have remembered. You don't forget a face like that, a presence like that. Remove your hand from her. The words were quiet, conversational even, but they carried absolute authority. Derek laughed, but it sounded nervous. This is my wife, ex-wife, I whispered, finding my voice from somewhere deep inside. Ex-wife. The corner of the stranger's mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. Ex-wife, he repeated. And somehow when he said it, it sounded like a declaration of freedom. His eyes moved back to Derek. I will not ask again. Derek let go of my arm as if I'd burned him. He stepped back, trying to maintain his dignity, but I could see the fear creeping into his expression. This is harassment. I'll call the police. Please do. The stranger's voice held dark amusement. I'm certain they would be very interested in the bruises forming on Ms. He looked at me expectantly. Chen, I breathed. Emma Chen. Ms. Chen's arm. He said my name like he was tasting it, rolling it around in his mouth to test the flavor, and perhaps interested in the contents of Mr. Henderson's safe, which I believe contained several falsified documents for other clients. Mr. Henderson made a strangled sound. How do you— I make it my business to know things. The stranger took another step closer, and I caught that scent again. Expensive. Intoxicating. Undercut with gunpowder and something metallic that my hindbrain recognized as danger. Now, Ms. Chen, did you want to sign those papers? Everyone was looking at me. Derek with barely contained rage. Mr. Henderson with desperate hope that this would all go away. The two bodyguards with professional disinterest. And him, this beautiful, terrifying stranger, with something in his eyes I couldn't name. My voice cracked. I don't know. Then you don't sign. He said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. Not tonight. Not until you're certain. She doesn't have a choice, Derek started. The settlement will wait. The stranger's voice cut through Derek's protests like a blade. Or it won't. Frankly, I don't care about your settlement, Mr. Morrison. But I do care about women being coerced into signing legal documents while clearly under duress. He glanced at Mr. Henderson. I believe that's grounds for the Bar Association to review your license, counselor. The threat hung in the air, crystal clear. Derek's face was turning red. Who the hell do you think you are? The stranger smiled then, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. Beautiful and cold and absolutely merciless. Someone you don't want to know. One of the bodyguards stepped forward, and I noticed the telltale bulge under his jacket. Derek noticed too. The color drained from his face. We're leaving, Derek said quickly, grabbing his briefcase. This isn't over, Emma. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, a real lawyer. No, the stranger said softly. She won't. Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a debate. Derek hesitated, looked like he wanted to argue, but Mr. Henderson was already gathering papers with shaking hands, clearly desperate to escape. They left together, practically running to the stairs rather than waiting for the elevator. And then I was alone in the hallway with three strangers who felt infinitely more dangerous than my ex-husband ever had. The man in the black suit turned to me, and his expression softened slightly. Though softened was relative. He was still intimidating as hell, still radiated power and danger, but something in his eyes was almost gentle. Are you all right, Ms. Chen? The question, asked in that smooth voice with what seemed like genuine concern, broke something inside me. I started to shake, the adrenaline finally catching up with me. My knees felt weak. I don't know what just happened. You were about to make a mistake. He took a step closer, and I should have been afraid, but somehow I wasn't. "May I see your arm?" I held it out without thinking, and his fingers, surprisingly gentle, pushed up my sleeve to reveal the angry red marks that were already darkening to purple. His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking beneath that perfect skin. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long what? How long has he been hurting you?" The question was so direct, so intimate coming from a complete stranger, that I couldn't lie. 3 years together, 3 years apart. Tonight was the first time since I left that he touched me again. Those dark eyes lifted to mine, and I felt caught in their depths, drowning in something I didn't understand. It will be the last time. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact, delivered with such absolute certainty that I believed him. "I should go," I whispered, though I had no idea where I would go. Back to my studio apartment with its broken heater and thin walls. Back to my life of scraping by, always one emergency away from disaster. "I'll have my driver take you home. I can't. I don't even know who you are." He smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes, warming them slightly. "My name is Damien Castellano. And I've been looking for you, Emma Chen." The word sent ice down my spine. "What?" "Not you specifically," he clarified, though something in his expression suggested otherwise. "But I knew the moment I saw you in that window," he gestured to Mr. Henderson's office, "that you needed help. Call it instinct. And you just help random women in office buildings?" "No," he said simply. "I don't." The admission hung between us, heavy with implications I was too exhausted and confused to unpack. One of the bodyguards cleared his throat softly, and Damien glanced at him before returning his attention to me. "It's late. You're shaking. Let me at least ensure you get home safely." He paused. No obligations, no expectations, just a ride home. Every instinct I had screamed that this was dangerous, that men like him, whoever he was, didn't do anything without expecting something in return. But I was so tired of being afraid, so tired of being alone, and something about the way he looked at me made me feel, for the first time in years, like I mattered. "Okay," I whispered. His smile was triumphant and possessive, and should have terrified me. It didn't. The elevator descended in silence, broken only by the soft hum of machinery and my own unsteady breathing. I stood between the two bodyguards while Damien faced the doors, his reflection sharp in the polished metal. Even in that distorted mirror he was striking, all clean lines and controlled power. I shouldn't have gotten in this elevator, shouldn't have agreed to anything, but Derek's fingerprints still burned on my arm, and the alternative was walking back out into the rain alone, taking the bus to my empty apartment where the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor's television until 2 a.m. "Your arm," Damien said without turning around. "We should have ice on it." "It's fine," I lied automatically. The pattern of my life. Minimize, deflect, pretend everything was manageable. He turned then, and the space suddenly felt smaller. "It's not fine, Emma. May I call you Emma?" The way he said my name, with that slight accent curling around the syllables, made something flutter in my chest. "Yes, Mr. Castellano." "Damien." His eyes held mine. Just Damien. The elevator chimed, and the doors opened to an underground parking garage that was nothing like the crumbling structure I'd parked in. This was all polished concrete and perfect lighting, empty except for a handful of luxury vehicles that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. The black SUV I'd seen from the window sat waiting, and a driver stood beside it. Another man in a dark suit, another face that suggested violence was just a profession, not a personality trait. He opened the rear door as we approached. Damien gestured for me to enter. The interior smelled like leather, and that same expensive cologne. His scent, I realized. The seats were butter soft, and there was more leg room than in my entire studio apartment. A partition separated us from the driver, tinted so dark I couldn't see through it. One of the bodyguards slid into the front passenger seat while the other moved to a second vehicle I hadn't noticed. Damien settled beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, far enough that we weren't touching. Somehow, the distance felt intentional, controlled. "Where do you live?" he asked as the driver pulled out smoothly. I gave him the address, my cheeks burning with shame. 5th Street. Everyone in the city knew 5th Street, where the desperate and the broken washed up, where the buildings hadn't been updated since the 70s, where you could rent a studio for cheap if you didn't mind the crime rate or the cockroaches. If Damien judged, his face didn't show it. He simply relayed the address to the driver through a speaker system, then turned his attention back to me. From a compartment in the door, he pulled out a first aid kit, because of course he had a first aid kit in his car. "May I?" He held up an ice pack. I nodded, unable to find words. He cracked the pack to activate it, the sound sharp in the quiet cabin, then gently wrapped it in a clean cloth before pressing it to my arm. His fingers were warm against my skin, his touch careful, almost reverent. "Tell me about him," Damien said quietly. "Your ex-husband. Why do you care? Humor me." I watched the city lights slide past the tinted windows, gathering my thoughts. We met when I was 23. I was working at a diner, going to community college part-time. He was charming, successful. He made me feel like I was worth something. I laughed bitterly. Stupid, right? Not stupid. Human. He changed after we got married. Or maybe he didn't change. Maybe I just finally saw who he really was. The criticism started small. My clothes weren't nice enough. I wasn't educated enough. I embarrassed him in front of his colleagues. The words spilled out easier than I expected, like a dam breaking. Then came the isolation. He didn't like my friends, didn't want me talking to my family. Said they were toxic, that I was better off without them. Damien's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just held the ice pack steady against my bruised skin. The first time he hit me, he cried after, begged for forgiveness, swore it would never happen again. I closed my eyes against the memories. It happened again, and again, until I couldn't remember what it felt like to not be afraid in my own home. "How did you leave?" A woman at the diner, Rosa, the cook. She noticed the bruises I tried to hide. She got me in touch with a shelter. I left with nothing but a backpack while he was at work. Filed for divorce from a borrowed phone. I opened my eyes, looking down at the ice pack. That was 3 years ago. He's been fighting it ever since, dragging it out, making it expensive so I couldn't afford a lawyer. Tonight was supposed to be the end of it. "It will be," Damien said, and again there was that absolute certainty in his voice. "But on your terms, not his. You don't understand. I can't afford—" "You can now." I pulled away slightly, suddenly wary. "I can't accept money from you. I don't even know you." "You don't know me yet," he corrected, a slight smile playing at his lips. "But you will." He removed the ice pack, examining my arm with a critical eye. "The bruising will be worse tomorrow. You should photograph it. Document everything from tonight. The coercion, the threats, all of it. Why? Because men like Derek Morrison need to understand there are consequences for their actions." His eyes met mine, and I saw something dangerous lurking in their depths. And I am very good at delivering consequences. The way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. Not fear, exactly, but awareness. This man was not safe. Whatever world he operated in, it wasn't the one I knew. Yet here I was, sitting in his vehicle, letting him tend to my wounds, feeling more protected than I had in years. "Who are you, really?" I whispered. "You're not just some good Samaritan who happened to be in that building." "No," he agreed. "I'm not." "Are you going to tell me?" He studied me for a long moment, and I had the sense of being evaluated, measured against some standard I couldn't see. Finally, he said, "I'm a businessman, Emma. I deal in investments, acquisitions, problem solving. I have resources and connections that most people don't." It was the truth, but not the whole truth. I could feel the weight of what he wasn't saying, the careful selection of words that revealed nothing while appearing to be transparent. "Why were you in that building tonight?" "A meeting with a potential associate who has offices on the 3rd floor. We finished early." His fingers traced the edge of the ice pack absently. "I saw you through the window as we were leaving, saw him grab you, saw the fear on your face. And you decided to interfere in a stranger's life?" "Yes." "Why?" Something shifted in his expression. A shadow of memory, perhaps, or old pain carefully concealed, because someone should have interfered in another woman's life once, and no one did, because I have the power to help, and choosing not to use it makes me complicit. He paused. And because when I saw you, something inside me recognized something inside you, survival, strength masquerading as fragility, a will that hasn't been broken despite someone's best efforts to break it. His words carved into me, finding places I'd kept hidden even from myself. I wanted to look away from the intensity of his gaze, but found I couldn't. "You don't know me," I said. But it sounded weak even to my own ears. "Not yet," he repeated, and this time it sounded like a promise. The SUV slowed, and I realized with a start that we were on 5th Street, pulling up in front of my building. The contrast was jarring, this luxury vehicle in front of my decrepit apartment building with its peeling paint and broken security door. Damien looked at the building, his expression carefully neutral, but I saw the slight tightening around his eyes, calculating, assessing. "This is where you live." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Rent controlled. It's all I can afford on a waitress salary." "Which bar?" "Smokey's, 3 blocks from here." He nodded slowly, committing the information to memory with the focus of someone who forgot nothing. The driver appeared at my door, opening it with professional efficiency. The November air rushed in, cold and damp with rain that had finally stopped but left everything glistening and dark. I moved to exit, but Damien's hand on my wrist stopped me. Gentle but unmistakable. "Wait." From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a business card. Expensive cardstock with embossed lettering that caught the streetlight. A phone number, nothing else. "If Derek contacts you again, if anyone contacts you about the divorce, the settlement, anything, you call me first." "Understood?" "I can't... Emma." He said my name like a command and a caress simultaneously. "Take the card." I took it, the paper heavy between my fingers. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want to." He released my wrist, but I could still feel the warmth of his touch. "And because you deserve someone in your corner who isn't afraid of men like Derek Morrison, and you're not afraid of him." His smile was sharp as broken glass. "I'm not afraid of anyone." I believed him. I stepped out into the cold night, my heels clicking on wet pavement. The bodyguard who'd ridden in front appeared beside me, a silent shadow. "Marco will see you safely to your door," Damien said from inside the vehicle. "That's not necessary. It is to me." There was no arguing with that tone. Marco gestured politely toward the building, and I walked with this stranger beside me, hyper-aware of his presence, of the way he moved with predatory grace, of the bulge under his jacket that I now recognized as a weapon. The building's security door hung slightly ajar. It had been broken for months, and the landlord refused to fix it. Marco noted this with a slight frown, holding the door for me as we entered a lobby that smelled of mildew and fried food and human desperation. The elevator was broken, as always. We took the stairs to the 4th floor, Marco staying one step behind me, his eyes constantly scanning. When we reached my door, 4C, the numbers hanging slightly crooked, I fumbled for my keys with shaking hands. "Thank you," I said, turning to face him. Marco nodded once, his expression unchanged, then waited while I unlocked my door and stepped inside. Only when I'd closed and locked it did I hear his footsteps retreating down the hallway. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding, Damien's card still clutched in my hand. My studio apartment felt even smaller than usual after the spacious SUV. One room that served as bedroom, living room, and dining room, a tiny kitchenette along one wall, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. The radiator clanked and hissed, producing more noise than heat. I could hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door yelling at her television, something about a game show. Through the thin walls, someone's baby cried. This was my life. This was what I'd escaped to, what I'd fought so hard to keep. My freedom measured in square feet and minimum wage, and the absence of Derek's fists. I looked down at the business card. The number seemed to glow in the dim light from my single lamp. My phone buzzed in my purse, making me jump. I pulled it out, a cracked iPhone I'd bought used 2 years ago, and saw 3 messages from an unknown number. "You'll regret tonight. This isn't over. I'll make you sorry you embarrassed me. Derek." Of course. He'd probably been typing furiously the entire drive home, working himself into a rage, deciding that tonight's humiliation was somehow my fault. My hands shook as I screenshot the messages, remembering Damien's advice to document everything. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I dialed the number on his card. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. Emma. Just my name, but the way he said it made me feel less alone in my shabby apartment. He's texting me. Threats. I read them aloud, my voice steadier than I felt, silence on the other end, but I could feel his anger through the phone, cold and controlled and absolutely lethal. Send me screenshots, Damien said finally, and block his number. He'll just use another phone. He won't contact you again after tonight. Trust me, there it was again. That absolute certainty, that sense that Damien Castellano made statements, not promises, because his word was simply fact waiting to happen. How can you be sure? Because I'm going to make certain he understands the consequences of bothering what's mine. The words hung in the air between us. What's mine? Possessive. Claiming. I should have been offended, should have objected, but instead I felt something warm unfurl in my chest, something dangerous that felt like hope. I'm not yours, I said. But it came out as a question. Not yet, he said for the third time. And now it sounded like inevitability. Get some rest, Emma. Tomorrow will be better than today, I promise you that. He hung up before I could respond. I stood in my tiny apartment, holding my phone, feeling the imprint of his words on my skin like a brand. Through the window, I could see the black SUV still idling at the curb, a dark sentinel in the night, watching, protecting, claiming. I should have been afraid. I wasn't. I pulled out my laptop, another secondhand purchase, and emailed the screenshots to the number Damien had called from. Then I blocked Derek's number, feeling a small surge of power in that simple action. The SUV's headlights flashed once, twice, before it pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the night, taking Damien Castellano with it, and leaving me with more questions than answers. I touched the bruises on my arm, then looked at his business card still in my hand. Heavy cardstock, embossed numbers, the weight of possibility. Tomorrow, I would go to work at Smokey's and pretend tonight never happened. I would serve drinks and smile at customers and collect tips that never quite covered rent. I would survive, because that's what I did. But something had shifted tonight. Some door had opened that I didn't know how to close. Wasn't sure I wanted to close. I placed Damien's card on my nightstand, next to the lamp, where I could see it. And for the first time in 3 years, I fell asleep feeling safe. The smell of stale beer and fried food greeted me as I pushed through the back door of Smokey's at 4:30 the next afternoon. The bar wouldn't open for another half hour. But I always arrived early, partly because I needed the job too much to risk being late, partly because the walk from my apartment gave me time to prepare the mask I wore for customers. Today, the mask felt heavier than usual. "You look like hell, Chica," Rosa called from the kitchen, her round face appearing in the service window. She was 50-something, built like someone who'd survived hard years and come out stronger, with hands that could turn out perfect enchiladas and comfort in equal measure. "Rough night," I said, tying my apron around my waist. The black fabric hid the cheap slacks I'd thrifted, the white button-down that had seen better days. My uniform of invisibility. "Derek?" Her voice sharpened with concern. "He wanted me to sign the papers. I didn't." I busied myself with checking the bar stock, counting bottles I'd counted 100 times before. Anything to avoid her knowing eyes. Good. "That pendejo doesn't deserve to take anything more from you." She paused. "But that's not what has you looking like you saw a ghost." I touched my arm unconsciously, where the bruises had indeed darkened overnight into an ugly purple-black canvas. I'd covered them with a cardigan despite the bar's perpetual warmth, couldn't bear to see them or explain them. "I met someone," I said finally. Rose's eyebrows shot up. "A man?" "It's not like that. He just helped me. With Derek." The explanation felt inadequate. Couldn't capture the intensity of Damien's presence, or the way he'd looked at me like I was something precious and breakable and worth protecting. "Helped you how?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting spam, or maybe my landlord demanding rent that wasn't due for another week. Instead, I found a message from an unknown number. Good morning, Emma. I trust you slept well. A lawyer will contact you today regarding your divorce proceedings. Her name is Catherine Walsh. She's the best. Don't worry about payment. It's handled. D. My breath caught. A lawyer. The best. Payment handled. Emma? Rosa's voice seemed to come from far away. You okay? You just went pale. Another message appeared. Also, Derek Morrison will not be contacting you again. Ever. The certainty in those words, even typed on a screen, sent a shiver through me. What had Damien done? What kind of man could send a text message at 4:30 in the afternoon and make promises that sounded like prophecies? I have to make a call, I said, already moving toward the back alley where I could have privacy. The November air bit through my cardigan as I stepped outside, but I barely felt it. My fingers trembled as I pulled up Damien's number. Already saved in my contacts, though I didn't remember doing it. Maybe I'd done it last night in that hazy space between sleep and consciousness. When his voice still echoed in my head, he answered immediately. Emma. That voice, smooth as whiskey, dark as sin. Did you receive my messages? You can't hire me a lawyer. I can't accept that. You can, and you will. No room for argument. Catherine is already reviewing your case. She'll call within the hour. Damien, I don't understand what's happening. Why are you doing this? Silence stretched between us, filled only by my harsh breathing and the distant sound of traffic. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle. Because you needed help, and I have the means to provide it. Because Derek Morrison deserves to lose everything he tried to take from you. Because... He paused, and I heard something shift in his tone, something raw beneath the control. Because I want to. That's not a reason. It's the only reason that matters. A muffled conversation in the background, someone speaking rapid Italian. I have to go. Accept Catherine's call. Trust me, Emma. I don't know if I can. Then learn. He hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in the cold alley, my heart racing. I wanted to be angry, wanted to feel manipulated, controlled, but underneath the confusion and fear, I felt something else entirely. Relief. For the first time since I'd left Derek, someone was fighting for me. Someone with the power to actually make a difference. The phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Ms. Chen, this is Catherine Walsh. I believe we have some legal matters to discuss. Her voice was crisp, professional, the kind that commanded boardrooms and courtrooms with equal ease. I leaned against the brick wall, trying to steady myself. Mr. Castellano hired you. Mr. Castellano retained my services on your behalf, yes. I've reviewed the documentation from your attempted settlement last night. Quite the circus, from what I understand. Mr. Henderson should be reported to the bar, and will be by end of business today. The casual competence in her voice was almost dizzying. I can't afford... That's not your concern. Your concern is answering my questions honestly, so I can build the strongest case possible. Now, shall we begin? For the next 20 minutes, I stood in that alley and told Catherine Walsh everything. The marriage, the abuse, the isolation, Derek's financial manipulation, last night's coercion. She made efficient notes, asked pointed questions, never once made me feel like I was anything less than a client who deserved her full attention. I'll have preliminary papers filed by tomorrow morning, she said finally. Mr. Morrison is going to discover that dragging out divorce proceedings is significantly more expensive when the other party has proper representation. I expect we'll have a settlement within 6 weeks. One that's actually equitable. 6 weeks? I'd been fighting for 3 years. 6 weeks, she confirmed. I don't lose, Ms. Chen. Ever. She hung up, leaving me staring at my phone like it might contain answers to questions I didn't know how to ask. I went back inside to find Tony, the bar owner, already setting up for opening. He was 60, built like a retired boxer, with a face that had seen every kind of trouble and decided most of it wasn't worth the effort. You're distracted today, he observed, pulling a case of beer from the cooler. Sorry, Tony. Won't happen again. Didn't say it was a problem, just an observation. He studied me with shrewd eyes. Those bruises on your arm, your ex? I'd forgotten to adjust my sleeve. The cardigan had shifted during my conversation, exposing the edge of Derek's handiwork. I quickly covered it. It's handled. Good. Because if it wasn't, I know people. Everyone in this neighborhood knew people. It was how you survived. Networks of mutual protection. Favors owed and paid. The informal economy of the desperate and determined. Actually handled this time, I assured him. I have a lawyer now. His eyebrows rose. Yeah. That's good, Emma. You deserve someone in your corner. The bar filled slowly as evening approached. Regulars mostly, people who came for cheap drinks and cheaper company, who knew my name and left decent tips and didn't ask questions about bruises or broken dreams. I fell into the rhythm of it, pouring beers and mixing simple cocktails, smiling and chatting and pretending everything was normal, except nothing was normal anymore. At 7:30, the door opened, and 3 men walked in wearing suits that didn't belong in Smokies. I recognized the type immediately. Corporate, expensive, probably slumming it on a dare or looking for some working-class authenticity to tell stories about later. They sat at the bar, and I approached with my customer service smile firmly in place. What can I get you, gentlemen? The one in the middle, late 30s, wedding ring, cologne that cost more than my rent, looked me up and down in a way that made my skin crawl. Well, aren't you a pretty little thing? What's your name, sweetheart? Emma. And you? Does it matter? He leaned forward, invading my space. How about 3 whiskeys, top shelf, and your phone number? I kept smiling even as revulsion coiled in my stomach. I can definitely handle the whiskeys. His friends laughed, and I turned to pour their drinks, feeling his eyes on me the entire time. This was part of the job, deflecting, demurring, keeping tips coming while maintaining boundaries. I'd gotten good at it. I set their drinks down, and wedding ring caught my wrist. Come on, beautiful. Just a number. I promise I'm a lot more fun than whatever loser you're going home to. Please let go of my wrist. Don't be like that. The lady asked you to let go. The voice came from behind me, deep and familiar, and carrying enough authority to make wedding ring's grip loosen immediately. I turned to find Damien Castellano standing there, Marco at his shoulder, both of them looking catastrophically out of place in Smokey's dim interior. Damien wore another perfect suit, charcoal this time, with a black shirt and no tie. He looked like violence dressed in Italian wool, like money and power and danger all wrapped in one devastating package. Every head in the bar had turned, conversations dying as people instinctively recognized a different species of predator. Who the hell are you? Wedding ring demanded, trying to recover his bravado. Damien's eyes moved to him, cold and assessing. Someone you don't want to antagonize. Now, you have 2 choices. You can leave quietly, or Marco here can escort you out. Neither option involves you touching her again. Marco shifted slightly, and I saw wedding ring notice the same bulge under his jacket that I had the night before. His face paled. We were just leaving, he muttered, throwing bills on the bar and practically running for the door with his friends in tow. The bar remained silent for a beat. Then slowly conversations resumed, though I could feel eyes still tracking us. Tony appeared from the back room, took one look at Damien, and nodded slowly, some understanding passing between them that I couldn't interpret. What are you doing here? I asked Damien, my voice barely above a whisper, checking on you. He moved closer, and I caught his scent, bergamot and cedar and something indefinable that made my pulse race. How are the bruises? Hidden. I was hyper-aware of the stairs, of Rosa watching from the kitchen window with frank curiosity, of Tony pretending not to listen while obviously listening. You can't just show up at my work. Why not? Because... I struggled for words. Because you don't belong here. Because people will talk. Because I make you nervous, he finished, a slight smile playing at his lips. Good. You should be nervous around me, Emma. I'm not a safe man. Then why are you here? His expression turned serious. Because safe men don't protect you from people like Derek Morrison. Safe men don't ensure that lawyers who enable abusers lose their licenses. Safe men don't make certain that entitled assholes in bars keep their hands to themselves. He paused. Safe men are useless to you right now. The truth of it hit me hard. He was right. Safety was a luxury I couldn't afford, And Damien was offering something far more valuable: protection, resources, power. I spoke with Catherine Walsh, I said. And she's terrifying and competent, and I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently touched my cheek. Just a brush of fingers that sent electricity through my entire body. Just let me help you. Why? I whispered. Please just tell me why. Something shifted in his expression. Some old wound showing through the careful control. Because 8 years ago, someone I loved was in a situation like yours. And I wasn't there to help her. By the time I found out, it was too late. The words hung between us, heavy with grief and regret. What happened to her? She died. His voice was flat, emotionless, but I could see the pain beneath. Her husband killed her, and I was halfway around the world building an empire instead of protecting my sister. My breath caught. Damien. So yes, Emma, I'm helping you because I can. Because I have the power and resources and connections that I didn't have 8 years ago. I'm helping you because every time I see a woman in trouble, I see Sophia. And maybe if I save enough people, eventually I'll stop seeing her face every time I close my eyes. The raw honesty of it broke something open inside me. I understood now. The intensity, the certainty, the possessive protection. This wasn't about me. Not really. It was about a ghost he couldn't save and a guilt he couldn't shed, but somehow that made it more real, more honest. I'm sorry, I said softly. Don't be. He withdrew his hand, the moment of vulnerability passing as quickly as it had appeared. Just let me do this. Let me help. Tony approached, wiping down the bar near us. Everything good here, Emma? Yes, I said, not taking my eyes off Damien. Everything's fine. Good. Because closing time's in 4 hours and you still have customers. It was a polite dismissal, and Damien recognized it. He nodded to Tony with something like respect, then turned back to me. I'll have Marco stationed outside until your shift ends. He'll ensure you get home safely. That's not necessary. It is to me, he said, echoing last night's words. Humor me, Emma. Please. The please did it. Such a simple word, but coming from a man who clearly wasn't accustomed to asking for anything, it felt like a gift. Okay, I agreed. His smile was devastating. Good. I'll call you tomorrow. He left with Marco, and the bar seemed darker after their departure, like they'd taken all the oxygen with them. I stood there, my cheek still tingling from his touch, my heart hammering against my ribs. Rosa appeared at my elbow. Okay, now you're telling me everything. I don't even know where to start. Start with who that man is and why he looks at you like you're the only person in the world. I glanced toward the door where Damien had disappeared. I have no idea, but that was a lie. I knew exactly why he looked at me that way. I was his second chance, his redemption, his way of saving the sister he'd lost. The question was, what did that make me? 3 weeks passed in a blur of shifting realities. Catherine Walsh was a force of nature. She filed motions, sent threatening letters, and somehow convinced Derek's lawyer that continued obstruction would result in consequences neither of them wanted. The divorce proceedings that had dragged on for 3 years suddenly moved with terrifying efficiency. Derek tried to fight back. Of course he did. But every attempt was met with immediate, overwhelming legal response. When he tried to claim I'd abandoned marital property, Catherine produced bank statements showing his gambling debts that he'd hidden during our marriage. When he claimed I was mentally unstable, she had 3 psychologists ready to testify about patterns of abuse and gaslighting. It was like watching a masterclass in controlled destruction, but it wasn't just Catherine. Strange things kept happening, small miracles that I couldn't explain but suspected had Damien's fingerprints all over them. The broken security door in my building was suddenly repaired. My landlord, who'd ignored maintenance requests for years, abruptly fixed my heating and had the entire apartment repainted. When I asked why, he'd muttered something about new management company and refused to make eye contact. My hours at Smokey's mysteriously improved. Better shifts, better tips. And Tony started paying me under the table for consulting that consisted of me doing my normal job. The extra money meant I could actually eat something other than ramen and day-old bread from the discount bakery. And every night, without fail, Marco appeared outside Smokey's at closing time to walk me home. I protested at first, insisted it was unnecessary, invasive, too much. Marco simply waited patiently through my objections, then fell into step beside me with the inevitability of a shadow. After the first week, I stopped arguing. Damien himself I saw rarely. Brief visits to the bar, always professional, always careful to maintain distance even as his eyes tracked my every movement. Phone calls that stretched late into the night. His voice in the darkness talking about everything and nothing. He asked about my day, my dreams, what I wanted from life beyond mere survival. No one had ever asked me that before. I don't know, I'd admitted one night, curled up in my newly painted apartment with the radiator actually producing heat. I used to want to finish college, study literature, maybe teach. But that was a lifetime ago. It doesn't have to stay in the past. His voice was thoughtful. What's stopping you? Money, time, the fact that I'm 28 and would be starting over. Those are excuses, not reasons. The certainty in his voice made me smile despite myself. Not everyone has unlimited resources, Damien. No, he agreed, but you have access to mine. I can't. We've had this conversation. You can, and eventually you will. A pause, and I could almost see him in my mind, sitting in whatever office or apartment he occupied, probably still wearing a suit at midnight, his face illuminated by city lights. I'm patient, Emma. I can wait until you're ready to accept help. Why are you patient with me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. You're clearly not a patient man in general. His laugh was dark and genuine. No, I'm not. I've built my life on taking what I want when I want it. But with you, he trailed off, and I held my breath, waiting. With you, I find myself willing to wait, willing to let you come to me in your own time. It's unsettling. Good, I said softly. You unsettle me constantly. Fair's fair. Do I frighten you? I considered the question honestly. Yes. But not the way Derek frightened me. With him, I was afraid of what he would do to me. With you, I'm afraid of what you make me feel. And what do I make you feel? The question hung in the darkness of my apartment, intimate and dangerous. Safe, I whispered. You make me feel safe, and that terrifies me, because I've learned that safety is usually an illusion, not with me. His voice dropped lower, became almost rough. I would burn the world down before I let anyone hurt you again, Emma. That's not an illusion. It's a promise. The intensity of his words should have sent me running. Instead, I felt warmth bloom in my chest. Dangerous and addictive. Your sister, I said carefully. Sophia. Tell me about her. Silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then. She was 3 years older than me, raised me after our parents died when I was 15. She gave up everything to make sure I could finish school, go to university. Met her husband during my second year. He seemed perfect. Successful, charming, attentive, like Derek. Exactly like Derek. Bitterness crept into his tone. I was too busy building my business to notice how she changed, how she became smaller, quieter, always apologizing for things that weren't her fault. By the time I understood what was happening, she'd isolated herself completely, wouldn't take my calls, wouldn't see me. I tried to intervene, but she defended him, said I was jealous of her happiness. That's what abusers do, I said quietly. They make you defend them, make you complicit in your own destruction. I know that now. Then, I just felt helpless, angry, a long breath. I left for a business trip to Tokyo. 3 weeks. When I came back, she was dead. He claimed it was an accident, that she'd fallen down the stairs. The police believed him. He walked free. Oh, Damien. He didn't walk free for long. His voice went cold, empty. 6 months later, he died in a car accident. Brake failure. Very tragic. The implication was clear, and I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt a fierce satisfaction that Sophia had been avenged, even if it came too late to save her. Is that what you do? I asked. Fix things that are broken? Deliver justice when the system fails? Among other things. He paused. Does that bother you? It should, I admitted, but no, it doesn't. Good. I could hear the smile in his voice. Because I'm not going to stop, Emma. Not for you. Not for anyone. The world is full of people like Derek Morrison, and the legal system moves too slowly to protect their victims. Someone has to fill that gap, even if it makes you a criminal. I'd rather be a criminal who saves lives than a law-abiding citizen who does nothing while people suffer. The moral absolutism should have troubled me. But I'd lived through 3 years of marriage, where the law did nothing to protect me, where restraining orders were just paper, and police reports vanished into bureaucratic black holes. I'd learned that justice and legality weren't always the same thing. "When's your next court date?" Damien asked, changing the subject smoothly. "Friday. Catherine says Derek's going to accept the settlement. He doesn't have a choice. She's threatening to subpoena his business records, and apparently there are some discrepancies he doesn't want examined too closely." "Good." Satisfaction colored his tone. "And after?" "After what?" "After the divorce is final." "What then, Emma?" The question felt weighted with possibility. "I don't know. Keep working, I guess. Save money. Maybe look into night classes." "You could do more than that." "Damien, just think about it," he said. "You have options now. You don't have to limit yourself to survival anymore." We talked for another hour, and when I finally hung up, I lay in my warm apartment staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly my life had shifted from black and white to technicolor. Friday arrived with December's cold bite. I wore my best outfit, still thrifted, still obviously cheap, but clean and professional. Catherine had told me I didn't need to attend the settlement conference, but I wanted to be there. Wanted to see Derek's face when he signed away his control over me. The courthouse was downtown, all marble and authority. Catherine met me outside, looking perfect in a gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Ready?" she asked. "Yes." We walked in together, through security, up to the 3rd floor where family court held its proceedings. Derek was already there with his new lawyer, Henderson having been disbarred 2 weeks earlier for ethics violations that mysteriously came to light. The new lawyer, a harried-looking man named Stevens, kept glancing at Catherine like she might bite. Derek saw me and his face twisted with rage. "You bitch. You think you've won. This isn't over, Mr. Morrison." Catherine's voice could have cut glass. "I suggest you speak to your lawyer before making any more threats." "I'd hate to add harassment charges to the settlement discussions." Stevens put a hand on Derek's arm, whispering urgently. Derek shook him off but fell silent, his eyes burning holes through me. I refused to look away, refused to give him the satisfaction of my fear. The conference room was small and sterile. We sat on opposite sides of a table, while a mediator explained the terms Catherine had negotiated. Derek would keep the house, but would pay me for my equity contribution. The savings account would be split evenly. All marital debts, including Derek's gambling debts that he'd hidden, would be his responsibility. It was more than fair. It was victory. "Sign it," Stevens urged Derek quietly. Derek's hand shook as he picked up the pen. "You're going to regret this," he said to me. "You think your new boyfriend can protect you forever? I know people too. I know—" He stopped mid-sentence, his face going pale. I followed his gaze to the conference room door, where Marco had appeared, silent and imposing. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there as a reminder of exactly who was protecting me and what kind of resources they had. Derek signed the papers. Catherine witnessed, the mediator notarized, and just like that, 3 years of legal warfare ended. I walked out of that courthouse a free woman, truly free, for the first time since I was 23 years old. Marco walked beside me to the street, where the familiar black SUV waited. The door opened, and Damien stepped out. He wore a black suit and gray tie, his hair slightly tousled by the December wind, and when he saw me, his expression transformed into something fierce and proud and possessive. "It's done?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Then we celebrate." He gestured to the SUV. "Please." I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries, kept distance, protected myself from whatever this was becoming. But I was exhausted and exhilarated and so tired of being alone. I got in the car. Damien settled beside me, and the door closed, cocooning us in leather and expensive cologne and possibility. The driver pulled into traffic smoothly. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption." His hand found mine, fingers intertwining, and the touch sent electricity up my arm. "I have a proposition for you, Emma, and I want you to really listen before you refuse." "What kind of proposition?" He turned to face me fully, his dark eyes intense. "Move in with me." The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. "What?" "Your apartment is adequate, but barely. You work too hard for too little money at a job that doesn't appreciate you. You have dreams you're not pursuing because you're stuck in survival mode." He spoke with absolute certainty, like this was already decided. "I have a penthouse with multiple bedrooms, a housekeeper, security, everything you could need. Move in. Let me provide for you while you figure out what comes next. I can't just... You're talking about being a kept woman. I'm talking about giving you space to breathe." His thumb traced circles on my palm, distracting and intimate. "No strings, Emma. Your own bedroom, your own space. You can quit Smokies or keep working if you prefer. You can enroll in classes, pursue your degree, anything you want. All I ask is that you let me help you build a life instead of just surviving one." "Why?" The question came out as a whisper. "Why do you care this much?" "Because I can't seem to stop caring." His free hand lifted to cup my cheek, and I leaned into the touch without thinking. "Because when I see you, I see strength and resilience and beauty that's been beaten down but never broken. Because you deserve more than a studio apartment with a broken heater and a job that doesn't value you. Because..." He paused, his expression turning vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. "Because I'm halfway to obsessed with you, Emma Chen. And I'm not fighting it anymore." My breath caught. "Damien, I know it's too much, too fast. I know I should be patient, give you time, let you come to this decision on your own. But I'm not a patient man, and I want you safe and cared for, and mine." The last word came out rough, possessive. "So I'm asking, begging, if I have to, move in with me. Let me take care of you. Please." The please undid me, just like it had at the bar. I looked into his eyes and saw hunger and need, and something deeper, darker, more intense. He wanted to possess me, protect me, own me in ways that should have sent me running. But I'd spent 3 years in a cage. Derek had locked me away and beaten me down, and tried to break me. Damien was offering a different kind of cage, a gilded one, lined with silk and safety, with doors I could open if I chose. The difference was choice, agency, power. "I need time to think," I said finally. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. "How much time?" "A day. Let me process everything that happened today. Let me sit with this offer and really consider it." "One day," he agreed. "But Emma, I should tell you something." "What?" His smile was dark and beautiful and completely unapologetic. "I always get what I want. Always. And I want you. So think carefully, because I'm not accepting no as a final answer. I'm just accepting it as not yet." The words should have angered me, should have triggered every warning bell about controlling men and possessive behavior. Instead, they made heat pool low in my belly and my pulse race. Because this wasn't Derek's control, brutal and diminishing, designed to make me small. This was Damien's control, fierce and protective, designed to make me safe, and maybe, just maybe, I was tired of being strong alone. I didn't sleep that night. My newly painted apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in despite the working heat and fixed windows. I paced the limited floor space, wearing a path between the kitchenette and the bed, turning Damien's proposition over in my mind like a puzzle I couldn't solve. "Move in with me." 3 simple words that represented a chasm I wasn't sure I could cross. On one side, independence hard-won through blood and tears, self-reliance forged in the fires of survival, the knowledge that I could make it alone even if barely. On the other side, Damien Castellano with his dark eyes and darker promises, offering safety and comfort, and something that felt dangerously like belonging. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent. He'd promised to give me a day, and true to his word, he hadn't called or texted, but I could feel his presence anyway. like gravity pulling at me from across the city. At 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and made coffee with the expensive grounds that had mysteriously appeared in my cupboard 2 weeks ago. Another gift I hadn't asked for, but couldn't bring myself to refuse. The brew was rich and dark, nothing like the cheap instant I'd survived on for years. Everything Damien touched transformed into something better, including me. I caught my reflection in the window. Still thin, still tired, but different somehow. My eyes held something they hadn't in years. Not quite hope, but not quite despair either. Possibility, maybe. The dangerous belief that life could be more than just endurance. My laptop sat on the small table, and I opened it on impulse, typing Damien's name into the search bar. I'd avoided doing this before, afraid of what I might find, but now I needed to know exactly who I was considering binding my life to. The results were illuminating and terrifying in equal measure. Damien Castellano, 32 years old, CEO of Castellano Investments, a private equity firm with holdings in real estate, technology, and what the articles diplomatically called security services. Net worth estimated in the hundreds of millions. Photographs of him at charity galas, business conferences, always in perfect suits with beautiful women on his arm, who never appeared in more than one photo. But it was the older articles that made my breath catch. References to his sister's death 8 years ago. Speculation about his rapid rise in business afterward. Suggestions of connections to organized crime that were never quite proven. A profile piece that described him as ruthlessly effective and not a man to cross. One article from an Italian newspaper, run through translation software, was more explicit. Castellano operates in the gray spaces between legal and illegal, wielding power through both legitimate business and less savory connections. Those who oppose him tend to find their fortunes rapidly declining through means that are difficult to trace back to him directly. I should have been horrified. Should have slammed the laptop closed and blocked his number and run as far as possible from a man who was clearly dangerous in ways I couldn't fully comprehend. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Because I'd already known, hadn't I? Had known from the moment he appeared in that hallway with his bodyguards and his absolute certainty that he operated outside normal rules. Had known when Derek's lawyer was disbarred with suspicious timing, when my building's maintenance issues suddenly resolved, when Marco appeared every night like a well-armed shadow. Damien Castellano was not a good man by conventional standards, but he was good to me. Good for me, perhaps. And after years of Derek's cruelty disguised as love, maybe I needed someone whose darkness was honest, whose possessiveness came with actual protection instead of prison bars. Dawn broke slowly over the city, painting my window in shades of pink and gold. I watched the sun rise over buildings that had witnessed my suffering and survival, feeling something shift inside me, a decision crystallizing like ice forming on glass. I picked up my phone and called him. He answered before the first ring finished, his voice rough with what might have been sleeplessness or concern or both. Emma. Yes, I said simply. Yes. Yes, I'll move in with you. Yes. I'll let you help me. Yes, to whatever this is between us that I don't have a name for yet. I paused, gathering courage, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. No hesitation. Just absolute certainty. Promise me that if I want to leave, you'll let me go, that this isn't just another cage with a prettier lock. Silence stretched between us, and I could almost feel him considering the words, weighing them against his nature, against the possessiveness I'd seen in his eyes, the need to control and protect and own. I promise, he said finally, that I will never force you to stay. That any cage I build for you will have doors you hold the keys to. A pause, and his voice dropped lower, more intimate. But I also promise that I will do everything in my power to make you never want to leave, to give you reasons to stay that have nothing to do with locks and everything to do with choice. The honesty of it stole my breath. Okay. I could hear the smile in his voice, the triumph. I'm sending Marco to you now. Pack what you want to bring. Anything you don't want to carry will have moved later. Damien, I just agreed. Can I have a few hours too? I've waited 24 hours, which is approximately 23 hours and 59 minutes longer than I wanted to wait. I'm not waiting anymore. The command in his voice sent shivers down my spine. Pack, Emma. You're coming home. Home. The word echoed in my mind as I hung up. Foreign and familiar at once. I looked around my studio apartment. At the peeling paint that had been covered but still showed through. At the furniture I'd collected piece by piece from thrift stores and street corners. At the life I'd built from nothing with bleeding hands and stubborn will. It had been enough to survive, but maybe I was ready for more than survival. I packed quickly, efficiently. Clothes that mostly weren't worth keeping but held memories of hard-won independence. Books I'd collected from dollar stores and library sales. A photograph of my mother, dead now for 5 years, who'd never known about Derek's abuse because I'd been too ashamed to tell her. A few pieces of cheap jewelry that meant something only to me. Everything I owned fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. 28 years of life, reduced to luggage I could carry alone. Marco arrived within 30 minutes, appearing at my door with his usual silent efficiency. He took my bags without comment, his expression neutral as always. But something in his eyes suggested approval. The SUV waited downstairs, Damien in the back seat. He stepped out as I approached, and the December morning seemed to warm in his presence. He wore casual clothes, jeans, and a black sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And he looked younger, more approachable, though no less dangerous. "Hi?" I said, suddenly shy. "Hi." His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes. "Ready?" "I think so." He took my hand, lacing our fingers together in a gesture that was becoming familiar, and guided me into the SUV. Marco loaded my bags into the trunk, and we pulled away from 5th Street for the last time. I watched my building disappear in the side mirror and felt no regret. Only anticipation mixed with fear. The good kind of fear that came with new beginnings rather than endings. Damien's penthouse was in the best part of the city, where buildings scraped the sky, and doormen wore uniforms, and the lobby had actual marble floors instead of stained linoleum. We rode a private elevator to the top floor, and I tried not to gape at the polished mirrors and soft lighting that made everything look like a luxury hotel. The elevator opened directly into his apartment. Of course it did. And I stepped into a space that belonged in magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, offering views that must cost a fortune in rent alone. The living room was all clean lines and expensive furniture, art on the walls that might have been original, a kitchen with appliances I didn't know the names for. Everything was in shades of black and gray and white, masculine and sophisticated and utterly unlike anywhere I'd ever lived. "Your room is this way," Damien said, guiding me down a hallway. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was larger than my entire studio apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, dressed in soft gray linens. Windows offered more impossible views. A door led to a private bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in, and a shower with multiple heads. "This is too much," I whispered. "This is the smallest bedroom," he said, amusement coloring his tone. "My room is at the other end of the hall. You'll have complete privacy, Emma. This is your space. And the strings you mentioned not having." He turned to face me fully, his expression serious. "I won't lie and say I don't want you in my bed. That I don't think about it constantly. Imagine what you'd look like in my sheets, what sounds you'd make when I touch you." Heat flooded my cheeks, and his eyes darkened with satisfaction. "But that happens when you decide, if you decide. Not before. And if I never decide," pain flickered across his face, quickly masked, "then I'll learn to live with wanting you and not having you. Because having you here, safe and cared for, is more important than satisfying my own desires." The honesty was devastating. I stepped closer, drawn by something I didn't fully understand. Attraction, yes, but also recognition. He'd been broken by loss just as I'd been broken by abuse, and we'd both rebuilt ourselves into people who knew how to survive, but not how to truly live. Maybe we could learn together. "Thank you," I said softly. "For all of this. For everything." "Don't thank me yet." His hand lifted to cup my cheek, thumb tracing my cheekbone with reverent gentleness. "I'm selfish, Emma. I want you here because it makes me feel better. Eases guilt I can't quite shed. I want to take care of you because it helps me sleep at night. This isn't purely altruistic." "I know." I leaned into his touch. "I'm selfish too. I'm here because I'm tired of struggling alone. Because your protection feels better than my independence. Because when I'm near you, I feel things I thought Derek had killed in me. What things? Desire. The word felt dangerous on my tongue. Want. The belief that maybe I deserve good things. His thumb moved to my lower lip, tracing it slowly. You deserve everything good in the world. And I'm going to spend however long you let me proving that to you. The kiss, when it came, was inevitable. His lips were soft against mine, questioning rather than demanding, giving me space to pull away if I wanted. I didn't want to. I pressed closer instead, my hands fisting in his expensive sweater, and felt him groan low in his throat. The kiss deepened, his tongue tracing the seam of my lips until I opened for him. He tasted like coffee and dark promises, his hand sliding into my hair while the other settled at the small of my back, holding me against him. I'd kissed Derek thousands of times, but it had never felt like this. Like coming home and falling off a cliff simultaneously. Like safety and danger perfectly balanced. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against mine. I should let you unpack, he said, though his hands remained on me, unwilling to let go. You should. I should give you space to settle in, probably. I should be patient and gentlemanly, and let you come to me in your own time. That would be very considerate. He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, and what I saw there made my pulse race. I don't want to be patient or gentlemanly, Emma. I want to carry you to my bed and show you exactly how thoroughly you've destroyed my self-control. Heat pooled low in my belly. Then why don't you? Because you deserve better than a man who can't wait. Because you've been rushed and controlled and coerced, and I refuse to be another man who takes what he wants without caring what you need. The restraint cost him. I could see it in the tension of his jaw, the tightness around his eyes. And that restraint, that obvious struggle against his own desires for my benefit, undid something inside me. What if what I need, I said slowly, is to feel wanted, to be with someone who chooses me not because he can control me, but because he can't help himself? His eyes darkened to nearly black. Emma, I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Not because I'm afraid or coerced or have no other options. I stepped back, pulling him with me toward the bed, but because for the first time in my life, I want something just for me, and what I want is you. The last thread of his control snapped. He kissed me again, harder this time, walking me backward until my legs hit the bed. We fell together onto soft sheets, and his weight above me felt nothing like Derek's had. Not crushing or threatening, but protective. Safe even in intensity. Tell me to stop, he breathed against my neck. And I stop. Always. Understand? I understand. I arched into his touch as his hand skimmed my sides. Don't stop. What followed was revelation. Damien touched me like I was precious. Like every gasp and moan I made was a gift he'd been waiting his whole life to receive. He learned my body with patient intensity, finding places that made me shudder, discovering what made me beg, and when we finally came together, when he filled me completely and stilled to let me adjust, he looked into my eyes with such fierce possession that I felt claimed in the best possible way. Mine. When I shattered in his arms, crying out his name, he followed moments later with my name on his lips like a prayer. After, we lay tangled in sheets that smelled like him, like us now, and I traced patterns on his chest while he played with my hair. I'm still scared, I admitted quietly. Of me? Of this. Of feeling this much, this fast. Of becoming dependent on you. His arms tightened around me. Then, we'll build your independence alongside this. You'll go back to school, pursue your dreams. I'll support you, but you'll achieve things on your own merit. This isn't about making you dependent, Emma. It's about giving you the foundation to become everything you're capable of being. And if I fail, you won't. But if you stumble, I'll be here to catch you. He tilted my chin up to look at him. I'm not Derek. I don't want you small and broken and easy to control. I want you strong and fierce and magnificent. I want to watch you bloom into the woman you were meant to be before he tried to destroy you. Tears stung my eyes. How do you always know exactly what to say? Because I see you, Emma Chen, all of you. The scared parts and the strong parts and everything in between, and I'm completely, irrevocably obsessed with every single piece. I kissed him again, softer this time, sealing something between us that felt like a promise. The weeks that followed were a study in transformation. I enrolled in spring semester classes at the university, literature and creative writing, subjects that had once been dreams and now felt possible. Damien hired a tutor to help me prepare, paid my tuition without blinking, and kept my textbooks stocked on shelves he'd had custom built in my room. I kept working at Smokey's, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to maintain some piece of my old life, some reminder of where I'd come from. Tony understood, and Rosa beamed with pride every time I talked about my classes. Derek disappeared from my life completely. I heard through Catherine that he'd moved to another city, his business mysteriously failing in the months after our divorce finalized. I should have felt guilty about his downfall. I didn't. Damien and I fell into a rhythm that felt both domestic and electric. Mornings where he made coffee while I studied. Evenings where I sat in his office doing homework while he conducted business in Italian and Russian, and languages I didn't recognize. Nights where we came together with an intensity that never seemed to diminish, each time discovering new ways to unmake each other. He introduced me to his world gradually. Dinners at restaurants where meals cost more than my old monthly rent, charity galas where I wore dresses that felt like armor and learned to navigate conversations with people who had more money than sense. Marco became a constant presence, somewhere between bodyguard and friend, his silent protection a comfort I'd learned to appreciate. I met Damien's business associates, men and women who operated in those gray spaces between legal and illegal, who spoke in coded language and treated him with the kind of respect born from fear and admiration equally. They accepted me without question, because I was Damien's, and that made me untouchable. 6 months after I moved in, I got my first A on a college paper. Damien took me to dinner to celebrate, and over wine that cost more than my old weekly paycheck, he pulled out a small box. "It's not what you think," he said, seeing my eyes widen. "Open it." Inside was a key, simple, silver, unremarkable except for what it represented. "Key to what?" I asked. "Everything. The penthouse, my office, my safe houses across the city. Full access, Emma. No locked doors between us. No spaces you can't enter." His dark eyes held mine. "I told you I'd build you a cage with keys you hold. This is me making good on that promise." I took the key with trembling fingers, understanding the magnitude of what he was offering. Trust. Absolute and complete. "I love you," I said, the words spilling out before I could second-guess them. "I know it's complicated, and probably unhealthy, and definitely too intense. But I love you anyway." His smile was brilliant and rare and completely genuine. "I fell in love with you the moment I saw you in that hallway, terrified but refusing to break. I've loved you every day since, Emma. Obsessively, possessively, completely." Is that healthy? Probably not. He reached across the table to take my hand. But I don't care about healthy. I care about you, about us, about building something that matters even if it doesn't fit conventional definitions. What are we building? A life, a future, a family maybe someday if you want that. His thumb traced circles on my palm. "I'm building you a world where you never have to be afraid again, where you can be strong and soft simultaneously, where you're protected and free in equal measure. That's a lot of pressure. You can handle it. You're the strongest person I've ever met." I laughed through tears I hadn't realized were falling. "I'm a mess, Damien. I have nightmares about Derek. I still flinch sometimes when doors slam. I'm in therapy 3 times a week trying to unpack years of trauma. And you're still here, still fighting, still growing stronger every day." He brought my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles. "That's not being a mess, Emma. That's being a survivor, and I'm honored to witness it." We went home that night and made love slowly, tenderly, his hands reverent on my skin, and afterward, wrapped in his arms with the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling, I felt something I'd never expected to feel again. Complete. Not because he completed me. I was learning to complete myself, to find worth independent of anyone's validation. But because he complimented me, filled spaces I didn't know were empty, made me want to be better while accepting who I was now. A year after that night in the attorney's office, I stood in the university auditorium receiving my associate degree, the first of many steps toward the bachelor's I was determined to earn. Damien sat in the front row, Marco beside him, both of them looking absurdly out of place among the proud parents and supportive friends. When they called my name, Damien stood and applauded, his pride visible even from a distance. And when I walked across that stage, I thought about the woman I'd been. Broken, terrified, convinced she deserved nothing more than survival. That woman had been strong in ways she didn't recognize, had endured horrors and kept going. Had found the courage to leave when leaving felt impossible, but she'd also been alone. Now I had Damien, complicated, dangerous, obsessive Damien who loved me with an intensity that should probably concern mental health professionals, but instead made me feel cherished. I had resources and opportunities and the freedom to pursue dreams I'd buried. I had a future that looked nothing like my past. After the ceremony, Damien pulled me into his arms, kissing me thoroughly while Marco politely looked away, and other graduates' families pretended not to stare at the gorgeous, clearly wealthy man, claiming me so publicly. "I'm proud of you," he whispered against my lips. "I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. It would have taken longer, been harder, but you would have found a way. That's who you are." He pulled back to look at me, his dark eyes soft. "But I'm glad I could make it easier. Glad I get to be part of your journey." "Where to next?" I asked. "Anywhere you want. The world is yours, Emma. You just have to decide what you want to take from it." I looked at this man who'd appeared in my darkest moment like an avenging angel, who'd offered protection without demanding submission, who'd given me tools to build myself up, rather than breaking me down to rebuild in his image. "I want everything," I said. "With you." His smile was triumphant. "Then everything is what you'll have." We walked out of that auditorium hand in hand, Marco trailing behind like a well-dressed shadow, and I felt the last piece of Derek's influence crumble away. I was Emma Chen, survivor, student, beloved. I was free, and I was finally, completely home.